Good morning. How is everyone? Nobody is feeling sick? Anong klaseng sick? Yung mga nasa likod. Lagi kayong nasa likod. Okay, dapat magpalit naman. Oo, nauubos yung oras sa kakakwento sa likod eh. Okay, so, community business. Aha. Let's start with be punctual. Sino yung hindi punctual? Tayo. Tumayo po yung hindi punctual. Na late sa pagbalik, na late sa pagpasok. Sino po yan? Late. Okay, tayo na. Okay, yung mga na late, no? Late for coming back from the break, from lunch, and coming back or coming in the morning. Alright, sino pa ang hindi nagsasalita? Na may ginintuang boses pero itinatago. Nako, ayaw tumingin sa akin. Okay, sino ang pwedeng Aha. Good morning. Pangaralan po nila yung mga nalilig.
Good morning, family. Mga ate at kuya, pang fourth day na po natin ngayon. So, nababasa po natin yung mga house rules sa harapan. Marami sa atin ang patuloy pa rin na nakaka-violate ng ating house rules. Siguro dahil nagkukulang tayo sa self-awareness or talagang hindi natin mapigilan yung sarili natin na mag-violate dito nang hindi natin napapansin. So, ang payo ko sa bawat isa sa atin, patuloy nating i-observe ang self-awareness, maging aware tayo sa mga kilos natin, isipin natin kung makakatulong ba ito sa atin, sa ating trabaho, sa ating mga kasama. Lagi nating iisipin na nagiging productive ang trabaho ng isang tao kapag alam niyang i-manage ang kanyang oras. Yun lamang po, family. Maraming salamat.
Okay, salamat sa magandang pangaral. No? Yun nga, di ba? Ang unang disiplina, yung pagiging, punctual on time, no? Okay, so, in general, karamihan naman sa inyo, come on time. But meron pa rin na pa-late ba? No? It's about time management. Okay, sa trabaho natin dito, di ba, ang daming in-expect sa atin. Ito siguro ang isa sa mga highly demanding job, no? To be an addiction professional. It's one of the most demanding job. Ang dami mo kasi dapat gawin at ang dami mong dapat malaman. So, sa kadamihan ng ating responsibilidad, hindi natin magagampanan lahat yun kung hindi tayo marunong mag-manage ang oras natin, di ba? Yun, no? Maraming tao na marami silang naabot sa buhay kasi magaling sila mag-manage ng oras. Yan ang key. That's the key, you know? Almost like how does he do it, you know? Ang dami niyang responsibilidad pero nagagawa niya. The secret is time management. And you're not gonna be a good time manager unless you're punctual, you know? It's also time awareness. Time awareness, no? I know some people struggle with being aware of time. Where you're at and what's the moment, no? We get absorbed so much on what's going on in the here and now, and then we forget that there are other things going on. So part of self-awareness is where you're at in time and what needs to happen next. Di ba? Okay, so ang susunod na ipupull up natin ay yung mga hindi nagpa-participate. Sino yun? No? Di ba? Active participation. Yung marami pa rin hindi natin naririnig yung gininto ang boses nila eh. Okay, so ang next pull up is sino yung hindi nagpa-participate? Masyado bang, nasa sarili niya lang. Sino po yon? Lack of participation. Wala. So lahat nagpa-participate. Sa tingin mo, no? Ano yun eh? Your own self-assessment. So sa tingin mo ba, ay you're actively participating? So what does active participation mean? Listening, right? All the time. Yan, active participation yan. Pag ikaw nandito, actively talking to your neighbor, that's not active participation. You know that, right? Okay, so sino yon? Sino yung hindi pa nagpa-participate? Diba nagsishare ng mga thoughts nila? So, I'm sure, ito na yung pang-apat na araw natin, di ba? In the last 3 days, I'm sure maraming na provoke ba sa inyong thoughts, no? Na ideas or anything na from the training na, yun pala yun. Ba't hindi ko naintindihan yun? Ano kaya ang ibig sabihin nun? Pero hindi naman nagtatanong. Di ba? Yung iba pinalalampasan sa isip. O kaya, tanong ko na lang yan sa kasamahan ko mamaya. No, that's not the way you do it. If there is something not clear, raise your hands and just ask the question. So, I'm sure some of you just keep it to yourself. No? I don't know kung nahihiya or whatever the reason, that's not good. So, those of you who do not do that, na may tanong ka pala, hindi mo maliwanag, pero hindi ka nagtataas ng kamay. Sino yon? Tahimik lang. Okay? Mayroon tayong isa. Sino pa? Okay? Thank you, Perry. Okay, sino pa? Salamat. Ayan. Okay, so gusto ko makita naman yung marinig naman sa inyo, no? Hindi ko alam. Give us some feedback. Just not just me, but the rest of us. Anong naririnig nyo na it's new? Na, wow, hindi ko alam ito masyado. Can I ask some questions? I have some questions about it. Just ask, no? Okay, so, pangaralan po natin mga nagsitayo at naging honest or matapat. Doc, ikaw naman po.
Good morning, family. Actually, Doc, guilty rin po ako dyan. Pero nakakataon lang, Doc.
At tumayo ka ng diretso. Sino ang deserving na magturo?
Hindi ko alam kung deserving ba ako na magturo talaga, Doc. Kasi, sa akin kasi, paano ko ba Yes po. Ako kasi hindi rin nagtatanong, Doc. Pero it's more of ako taking notes kung ano ba yung mga learnings na nakukuha ko po sa'yo. And then, tinitake note ko yun kung paano ko ba may improve namin as a group. Pinag-uusapan, parang kumbaga after training, pinag-uusapan namin kung ano yung mga na-take note namin na makakapag-improve sa amin. So sa mga kasama ko po na nakatayo ngayon, siguro kung meron mga hindi clear sa atin, it's better siguro na magtanong tayo para mas malinawan tayo kung ano ba yung mga hindi klaro sa atin and mas magawa natin ng mas maayos yung mga kailangan natin gawin. Thank you po.
Okay, salamat po. Maupo na po sila. Okay, so ganito yun, di ba? I have sat in classrooms and conferences, and a lot of times, somebody would say something, like the speaker would say something, and then it just trigger, some thoughts in me. Okay, maganda yung idea na yan. Pero paano natin gagawin yun? Ganon, no? Di ba? Maganda nga siya, pero hindi niisip pa. Kaya ba natin gawin to? O paano natin implement ito? Di ba, mga ganon ang question, no? So, hindi lang yung, okay, maganda yung idea. But, hanggang doon na lang yun. Kung hindi natin alam kung paano natin implement, posible ba? Is it viable? Yung idea na yun? Or, di ba, for you to ask those questions, makakatulong din sa iba kasi mag-iisip din sila, nga, paano natin gagawin yun? Di ba, maganda nga yung idea, but how are we gonna do it? So don't just leave it there. Na it's a nice idea. That's not the point, no? The point is, you understand the idea, you agree with it, it's a good idea, but what's the next step? How are we gonna do this? Hindi ko narinig sa inyo yun. No? Yung nga ganun tanong. Di ba? Otherwise, okay, natapos yung training, maraming learning, sabi, marami akong natutunan na bago, hanggang doon na lang yun, walang mangyayari doon. Di ba? So, already, like in your mind right now, think of it, like actualize it already. Di ba? That's the best way to look at things. How do we actualize it? That's what I want from you guys. Yes, Gilbert.
Good morning, family. Yun nga, tama nga naman yung sabi ni Doc. Kaya nga, we require you to make your learning application plan. So, every now and then, dapat may sinusulat kayo dyan kung ano yung mga plans na gagawin nyo in your section, and then put it into writing kasi at the end of our training, kailangan namin yan, and we will supervise yung pag-achieve nyo ng yung mga plans. And we need, kailangan po namin ng output from you after this training.
Thank you, Gilbert. Okay, so, this is my take, no? Correct me if I'm wrong. You tried so hard to put in so many components in your treatment. I see that, no? So talking about MI, no? Relapse prevention, etc., etc., no? So, ang dami, no? But, ang tingin ko, no? In your effort to do that, una-una mayroon ka ng, okay, ang platform ninyo, no? Yung TC. Tapos, you're trying to actually add components into it, right? So much. So, the question is, how are you gonna do all of those? Di ba? Kasi if you're going to do those things, you have to do it right. Sa ang filosofiya ko sa buhay, if I'm going to adapt something, I have to do it correctly and the best I can. Parang ang nangyayari, patsi-patsi. You do this, you do that. But meanwhile, you're not thinking, are you diluting the whole system? Right? Nadadilute yung system kasi kadami mong... I like to cook. So, I like to use cooking as a metaphor. Have you experienced na excited ka magluto ka, ang daming mo rekado, no? Lagay ka ng lagay, may gulay, may karne, may seafood. Sa isip mo, lalabas nito masarap. Right? And then natapos yung pagluluto mo, nutritious, maraming lahok, mga quality ingredients. Pero nung kinain mo, hindi mo maintindihan anong lasa. No, hindi mo ma-describe, ano ba itong naluto ko? Okay, you understand? Nawala ba yung essence, no? It got lost in the mix. And then you forgot what it is you wanted to actually cook. All along, you just wanted to do chop suey. Pero lumalabas na hybrid yung niluto mo. No? So, ganun. Parang ganun ang metaphor ko sa ano. So, hindi effective yun, ganun sistema. Ano? So, sa akin, before you do anything, no, although it sounds, okay, we're big on, the other thing is, oh, best practices, evidence-based, no? Na-excite tayo, ganun. It doesn't mean because it's evidence-based, it's best practice, that you implement it, that it's gonna work. It's not guaranteed it's gonna work. What that simply means is that intervention is research-based. That's it. That's it. It doesn't mean that automatically, if you do it, it's gonna produce the desired results. It's not like that. No? So, you have to really think it through. The whole thing. First of all, no, we need a platform where you can, number one, motivate a client who are not highly motivated. That's the key. Motivate a client who are not motivated. That's the key. When a client is highly motivated, kahit na yung programa mo, mediocre, no? Mediocre. But the client is highly motivated, he will get something out of the program. Motivation is a powerful thing. Okay? So look at that. Since that is the most challenging part, no, with our client, you have to think of when we implement all this good stuff, how can we do this at the same time trying to actually motivate them? Okay? So, we know that if we implement the TC, and I know that from experience, if we implement it, it's a very motivating program. Why? Because we empower them. Okay. So, how do we empower them? Let's just talk about the TC first. Set aside best practices, right? So, how do we make our TC in such a way that it is very motivational? Okay? Okay, so anong mga elements ng TC which can actually help us achieve that? Well, number one, it's empowering. Why is it empowering, the TC? Because we somehow, in the implementation, the correct implementation of TC, we actually get them to participate and own up the program. You understand the word to own the program? To own the program meaning, this is my program. I am part of this program. Okay? So, when I do my job, it's because I am, I'm helping this program, which is my program. They should be feeling like this is my home, this is my house. That should be the attitude, right? So if a resident disrespect the program, imagine one resident writes graffiti on the bathroom, right? They should be upset, right? They should be upset and say, why would you do that to our house? Why would you do that to our program? That should be the attitude, right? When residents begin to talk like that, you know that they are buying in the program, they're owning the program. And you know that in that, if that is the attitude, the motivation is right there already, right? So the model is capable of achieving that. Because who runs the program? We allow them to run the program. Look at the coordinator, the chief expediter, right? If they're really functioning well, if they are supervising them and training them, it will come a point that they feel like, I'm running this program. I'm an expediter. I'm helping run this program. You understand? So until those residents, especially the officers, feel that way, you don't have a good solid program. Because they have to actually, because that is what a therapeutic community is. In a TC, as the staff, we lead from behind. You understand that? We lead from behind. The residents are the front people who actually run the program, but we are behind. Another metaphor. A TC is like a play in a stage. Okay? The residents are the actors in the stage. They act their role, right? So if you're watching it, you feel like they are actually doing it on their own, right? But in reality is, we wrote the script. We wrote the script. They are not the director of the show. You understand? The director of the show is behind the scene. And what they are acting in there is a script. But it looks like, and they begin to believe that they're acting on their own. You understand? So it's like a play. We are behind. We know the script. We direct the script. We can change the script. We are the director, but they are the one acting out the whole show. That is what it is, right? We are not visible. We are not there. We don't all of a sudden go into the stage and say, stop, stop, stop. We don't do that, right? But sometimes we do that in the TC, right? We would like to be center stage, right? We have the power, but do not make them feel we have the power. In the reality of it, you really don't have to show them and tell them, I'm the boss. We are the boss. Okay? But the whole idea is for us to recede in the background and let them play out their role. That's it. That's my metaphor for a therapeutic community. But if the writers, the director is always on the stage, right, where they were trying to have a play, that is very disruptive. Okay? Are you understanding? Do you follow what I'm saying? That's what the model is. Okay? So when that model works, you don't have a lot of problems motivating the clients. Okay, so let's say we achieve that ideal condition. Your TC is running and your senior residents, the system works, you are able to train them, and they're able to assume those positions, and they're able to actually implement them correctly. You know, that point, you can do a lot of those different things. Let's add something into this, you know, so more input, right? How can we integrate? The question is, how do we integrate relapse prevention in this system without disrupting it? Okay, without disrupting it. How do we implement motivational interviewing? How do we implement MI? Can we make MI compatible with TC, which is very directive, and MI is non-directive? Those kind of questions, you raise that, right? Can we make it compatible? Okay, those are fundamental questions you need to ask. And not just like, oh, excited ako kasi motivate yung mga residente. It's not easy to do that. All right? So, the next is, whatever it is, you know, cognitive behavior therapy. Excited tayo lahat. Wow, cognitive behavior therapy. Okay, but how are we going to implement that within the context of what we are already doing? Without diluting, you know, the TC, the system, and also, you know, how do you say, being faithful to the model of cognitive behavioral therapy, for example. You understand? So at the end, you know, if we do not do this kind of critical thinking, mangyayari, madadailot yung evidence-based practice mo, madadailot mo yung TC, and at the end of the day, you're not gonna produce good results. Okay? Am I making sense or I sound crazy? Huh? Am I making sense? Are you following what I'm saying? Okay. You know, I have a chance to do this with you guys. I don't have a chance to do it with other TRC. Okay? But that's what I see happening. Okay? I said, oh my God. This is what they're doing now. Okay? And then, so I said, good luck. Okay, so at least now, I mean, I'm here, and you are doing this, so I've had chance to actually put in my 2 cents on what are you doing and how you're doing it. I'm familiar with those interventions. Okay? And I like those interventions. I have practiced those interventions. But there is a place for it. There's a time for it. And you need to pay attention to the context where you implement those things. I told you already, talking about cognitive behavioral, that this is a cognitive behavioral model to really, right? Some of you are familiar with cognitive behavioral. It's cognitive behavioral. TC is. It's in that green book. I wrote about it in that green book. Why or how the TC is cognitive behavioral model. Because it is. Okay? So you don't have to worry about adding in cognitive behavioral model in your TC because it is already cognitive behavioral. We talk about behavior, right? Feelings. And thinking. In the TC, we do all of those things. Okay? We don't call it that way. But if you really analyze and look at it, it's similar to cognitive. It's just a different implementation of cognitive behavioral model. Okay? I mean, we could still do some of those relapse prevention. We just have to find a way to integrate it, like I said, without diluting both the TC and diluting relapse prevention. That should be how we look at it. Okay? So you need to put your heads together on how to do this correctly. Okay? And I'm open to you to continue our discussion. It will be exciting for us to actually come up with an acceptable model, and all I'm saying to you is with all those things you want to put it in, you better be open to, like I said, adding the days of work. Because there is no way out of it. There's no way out of it. You have a very short program to begin with, right? How are you going to do all of those in a very short span of time? Even that is a challenge, right? Okay. So maybe, you open up and then we fix two problems. If we open up the possibility of looking at the weekends, right? Remember what I said? Most TC suffer because they let go the program on a weekend. We should stop doing that. It's bleeding us, allowing that. It's not cost effective. We waste a lot of energy, okay, by allowing that. So we have to look at how we structure our treatment. So recovery, like I said, is 24/7, right? So programming should be 24/7, right? So how are you gonna do that? It's something that you have to sit down and really put your head together, and redesign things. Okay? So that's my message to you guys. Okay, does that make sense? Makes sense, right? And I challenge you to do that. And if you can really do that, maybe the other TRCs can learn from you. Yeah, the other TRCs can learn from you. I like actually teaching you guys because many of you, when I first started this training, did not know about the TC. Yeah. So you don't have any preconceived notion of what the TC is. And to tell you frankly, when I've been doing this training, I found it much easier to train people who do not know about TC. Okay? And I have trained people in TRCs who have been practicing TC. They call it TC, right? So they have some ideas about the TC. So they have preconceived notions about the TC. And they are stuck in their way of doing things. Ang hirap baguhin. Okay, ang hirap baguhin. I'm very successful in TRCs that are new. TRCs with Chipop Hospital who are also very interested and more invested in the training. Right? And they are there, they pay attention, they follow what's going on. And those are TRCs that I did very well. Okay, I have trained in TRCs a staff who just graduated from college. And they didn't even know, what kind of work is involved when they first joined, right? And they were afraid to go inside the dormitories. They were afraid every day. They told me later on, I'm afraid every day I come in. I was so afraid, but I needed a job, so I stuck it out. Right? This is because rightfully so. They just graduated from college, and this is a new thing. Or they transition from being a teacher somewhere, and they come in. They have no idea about what a TC. They have no idea about substance, clients, people who use drugs. They were really just they don't know anything. But they're like sponges when you teach them. They pick it up. They pick it up. So 4 years later, 5 years later, many of them they go out and do seminars on the therapeutic community. They know how to run the program. Okay? They're not afraid anymore. They can go into the dorm, and talk to the residents and straighten them out. And they get a lot of respect, both men and women. Okay? Residents would just listen to them like that. So they learn. They learn easily because they don't have any preconceived notion. I could actually shape them the way they should be shaped in terms of working in the therapeutic community. But yung mga gurang na marami ng alam, they always feel like, wala na ako matututunan. I know that already. Yung ganun bang attitude, no? I think it's a defensive mechanism because they don't want to change what they have been doing for a while. Okay? So they always fall back to what was familiar to them. So when the things get stressful and difficult, they go back to the way they're doing it. So, walang pagbabago, right? Okay, so I like you guys because most of you didn't have any idea about the TC. So I can influence you in the right direction. All right, so that's a big plus. I don't have to waste my time. One of the things that I always complain about is when I go back to the center to say, you're wasting my time. I'm not gonna waste my time. I don't want to go back to those places. I want to go to a place where my time is not wasted, and the resources of the agency is not wasted. Okay, I prefer that. Okay, so yeah, so I like to go to places like this, and I look forward to going to your place. Because you never, many of your, although you have some ideas about the TC, which many of those were wrong. So we have to correct those, but it's not a big deal. We can fix it. Okay. Anything else here? Stay awake. Sino yon? Nahirapan. May nakita ko kahapon. Sino yon? Sino yon? Naiidlip. Okay. All right. It's okay. Okay. All right. So, Ruby, guilty ka ba, Ruby? No. I'm talking about yesterday. I'm talking about yesterday. Kahapon, guilty ka? Okay, pangaralan mo sila. From somebody who had experience.
Yes, from somebody on the day one was very jet lag. Jet lag. Opo, jet lag from the southern Mindanao. Good morning, family. Ate, kuya, good morning. So, ang tawag sa atin ngayon, be awake. Siyempre, alam naman natin na nasa training tayo ngayon, so kailangan natin maging alert kasi ang dami natin natututunan and alam natin ang ating speaker all the way from USA. So, i-grab natin yung opportunity. The father of this is here. So, lahat ng every word na sinasabi ni Doc ay napaka-importante para rin ito sa ating mga pasyente. So, ang epekto man good nito, family, baka later on, di Bisaya. Ang epekto nito, family, kasi baka may mga mamiss tayo na points na very vital yun para sa pagtulong sa ating mga pasyente. So, yun lang po. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby. Mapo na po tayo. Okay, finally, observe silence. Kahapon, people got carried away. It got so noisy, naging parang palengke. Okay, sino yung mga nagsa-side talk? When somebody is talking, come on, stand up. Okay, so, Doc, pangaralan mo nga sila. Kasama ka ba doon, Doc? Oh.
Family, pag may nagsasalita sa harap, please lang irespeto natin para pag nabigyan tayo ng chance na magsalita din, makikinig din lahat. Ayun lang.
Salamat. Okay, so, I know, I notice, my observation, anywhere I go, right, in the Philippines, we love to side talk. Seriously. And I'm trying to actually figure out why is it that we actually like to side talk. Okay, I've done training in Thailand. I've done training in Vietnam, right? They're not like that. Especially the Thais. You know? They sit there. They don't do side talks. But why do we love to do side talks? Right? So in the US, if you do that, that's very disrespectful. Very disrespectful. No? So, the speaker will be offended. Take it personally, So, but to us, I know you are not intending to be disrespectful. I understand that, It's just a habit. That I'm trying to figure out why do we love to do that instead of just listening and paying attention, Okay, so help me understand that. Okay. So, that's our community concern. We'll do better tomorrow, right? Okay. So, let's start the first lecture for the day. Trauma and substance use. All right. Thank you. What is trauma? All right, we have defined it already, but for this particular lecture, that's how it's defined. Emotionally painful and distressing or terrifying experience. Overwhelms people's ability to cope. Yep, that's a sign of trauma. Leaves them feeling powerless. Yes, those elements, powerlessness, terror, okay, distress. Those are hallmarks of traumatic experience. Okay, let's look at some statistics. How prevalent trauma among people with substance abuse. I was one of the participants in my training years ago. So she is trying to do her master's degree, and I keep suggesting different things to her. And I said, keep it simple, keep it simple. Why don't you study this? Just look at, prevalence of trauma among Filipino substance abuse in your center. Maybe we can generalize it. Just use the ACE, di ba? So how simple is that? Use the ACE, give it to your clients, right? Give it to your, and maybe compile about 100 cases, and in your particular facility, localize it, and say this is the prevalence of trauma in, let's say, Ilagan TRC. That's a piece of information right there, right? Yeah. So for a master's degree, I think that would be okay, right? It's very simple. So I say, keep it simple. Come on. You're thinking about big things. Keep it simple. That would be very useful, I said, because there is very little information about Filipino drug abusers and the prevalence of trauma. Okay? All right. This is actually an American study or statistics. Look at that. Estimated rates are from 25% to 95% of all patients entering addiction treatment. That's very significant, right? Now, mind you, I take this with a grain of salt. You know why? It's for people in addiction program. Not all of them are very honest about their traumatic experiences. Okay, especially if they actually took the study while the client is fresh in the program. You have to take it when they are already in the program towards the end, because hopefully at that time they're a little bit more open. No, estimated rates of PTSD are. Everybody understands what's PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. Not all trauma is PTSD, by the way. Okay? That's the most severe, okay, case of trauma, PTSD. But you don't have to have PTSD to be traumatized, okay, to have trauma. Okay. And this is outstanding, PTSD, is because the symptoms are really very strong or severe. The symptoms of trauma is severe, like they can even hallucinate. Sleep disturbance is common, disturbance is common. They have a lot of physical problems. They cannot go. It's hard for them to keep a job. It's hard for them to keep a relationship. That's how horrible PTSD could be, So that's an extreme case of trauma. Okay, so PTSD, approximately 25% of patients entering mental health treatment, of which 2/3 have substance abuse. So you can see the connection between PTSD and substance abuse. Rates are higher among women, opiate and cocaine dependent individuals. We understand, in the U.S., women, and I'm not sure, in the Philippines, what would be among female drug dependents, the rate of trauma and what kind of trauma. That's another interesting study that we could actually do, specific to women drug dependents in the Philippines. Okay, rates have been found to be higher among whites and African Americans versus Hispanic and Asian Americans. Okay. That's an interesting thing. So a lot of whites and blacks. So I'm thinking, see, the Asians are culturally, they are not forthcoming a lot of times, and the family even hide a lot of those things. So it's probably very difficult to get information from Asian Americans, right? Because they are not, unlike the whites, and the blacks, they're probably more forthcoming compared to the Asian Americans and also even the Latinos. So I wonder why, probably that explains why there are more higher incidents of trauma in white people and black people compared to, because trauma is across the board. It happens, Incest is common regardless of culture. And even in some cultures, it's common than others, okay? All right, so anyway, those are data from the US study. Many clients with substance use disorders have experienced trauma, but only 25% trauma victims will develop PTSD, okay? So only 25% will develop PTSD out of those people who have been traumatized. The trauma will usually produce symptoms even if full criteria for PTSD is not met. Okay. Yeah, so we don't minimize people, although they did not meet the criteria for PTSD. We do not minimize the extent of their trauma. Okay? Trauma may precede substance use disorder, occur during, or both. Okay, it could be a precipitating factor, trauma, and then when they begin to use substance abuse, they get re-traumatized again because of the lifestyle of that they lead, and then after, or both, before and during substance abuse, the trauma continues. For many people who develop poor criteria for PTSD, trauma was often just a singular event, but was a repetitive pattern. You understand? Singular event, but repetitive. Incest is a singular event, right? But repetitive. Okay, so sexually abused women, singular, but repetitive. Okay. And some of them will develop PTSD, depending on the severity of the traumatic experience. And also depending on the person's resiliency, or what we call protective factors in their lives. Okay, gender differences. For women, the most common events were rape, sexual molestation, physical attack, being threatened with a weapon, and childhood physical abuse. That's for women. Women not only experience a great number of PTSD symptoms than men, but they also experience them more frequently and for longer durations. So it tends that women manifest the PTSD more severely than men. The traumatic event most often associated with PTSD in men were rape, even men. Okay, rape, combat exposure, childhood neglect, and childhood physical abuse. That's for men. So there is a slight difference there on how women and men are traumatized and develop PTSD. Slight difference there. Okay? Okay. Simple versus complex PTSD, and we kind of talked about it yesterday. Simple PTSD typically develops from one incident, usually experienced as an adult, no? One incident. You could be like assaulted, somebody rob you, right? And you get assaulted, or, or you were in a crossfire, right? I remember, when I was young, growing up, going to college, riot by gangs was so common where I lived. And then I found a few times I found myself in the midst of it, coming in from school late at night. I had no clue that there were like a gang fight because the street was so quiet. It was so quiet, and and I was in the middle of it, and they were just like eyeing each other. That was terrifying. Okay, luckily, nothing really serious happened. But you can be in the middle of that. So at the time, luckily they were not using guns, but using pana. You know what I'm saying? You probably never heard of it, but they make this pana. You know what is that? Tirador, right? With an arrow. Yeah, that's what they use, and bolos, and luckily there were no guns. Okay, so that's terrifying. Terrifying. So you could be in the middle of that, or in a combat situation. That's happened here in Marawi before, right? Some people got caught. Civilians got caught in that fight. Just imagine the people who were actually traumatized by that experience. That was horrible. Okay, so that is traumatic. Even with that single incident, I bet you some people develop PTSD. Yeah. Okay, complex PTSD is associated with repeated incidents, domestic violence, or ongoing childhood abuse. Okay, broader range of symptoms, self-harm. Okay, self-harm, common with people, that's a symptom of trauma. Suicide, dissociation. losing time, numbing. These are all the symptoms of trauma or PTSD. Problem with relationships, memories, problem with memory, sexuality, health, anger, shame, guilt, numbness, loss of faith and trust, feeling damage. Okay, so these are the symptoms of PTSD. Those are horrible symptoms. So many of them with PTSD, I mean, they cannot live a normal life just like us. Number one, they cannot hold down a job, like I said before. They cannot maintain a relationship. It'll be tough. They cannot even take care of themselves. All right? So they really like totally, how do you call that? Emotionally crippled. That's how I would describe that. Okay? So very often they are actually put on medication because they have a lot of psychological issues. Cannot sleep, you know, because their arousal, you know, they're easily aroused. Okay? It's a horrible experience. Okay, let's look at complex PTSD, a complex of symptoms associated with early interpersonal trauma. Okay, this is what happened. Alterations in the regulation of affective impulses, difficulty with modulation of anger, and being self-destructive. So when, you know, we have a word for this when I was in TC. Pag pumutok, narinig mo yan? That's an expression. Pag pumutok, nako, parang vulkan. That person is lost already. That's a sign. That could be a sign of PTSD. All right? So I'm sure you have seen that with your clients, right? So that's why I told you, you know, you have to learn grounding, right? When they are in that state, they are not rational, by the way. They lost the rationality. So you cannot carry on a dialogue, a conversation, or do counseling with a person when he's in that state. Okay? So the best you can do is if you can encourage him to do grounding, or, you know, we'll talk about it, how you can actually help, you know, the environment, help pacify him. Okay, because you cannot control the guy, but you can control the environment, right? Okay, attention and consciousness leading to amnesias, dissociative episodes, and depersonalization. Dissociation, right? You understand what's dissociation? He separates from his body, like he is disembodied. Okay? And probably that happens during a trauma experience. That's when that episodes of depersonalization and dissociation happens during the traumatic experience. Okay? So it's the body's and the mind's defensive mechanism so that, you know, the person can at least be still intact psychologically. Otherwise, the person can go crazy, right? So it's the mind's way. So the mind separates from that event. And a lot of times they have no memory of what happened because of that. Or they have amnesia of what happened. It's a protective thing, you know, right? And those are what happens with a lot of people who are sexually assaulted. And that also becomes common symptoms of them, of their trauma, depersonalization and dissociation. And you see them sometimes in counseling, you know, when they are stressed and you're talking about the event, they begin to dissociate. So that's why since we do not know, we are not expert on trauma, and you don't know how to spot when a person is dissociating, do not touch on the trauma event. Because once he's triggered, he can go into that state, okay? Self-perception, chronic sense of guilt and shame. Paradoxically, they blame themselves for the trauma a lot of times. Yeah. So, and culturally, if it's a sexual event, culturally, we also tend to blame the victim, right? So that reinforces the shame and guilt. They are already feeling guilty and shame without people telling them that that was your fault, because he actually attributes the fault to himself or herself. That's what happens. Okay? Interpersonal relationship, not being able to trust, not being able to feel intimate with people. So the person is totally dysfunctional emotionally. That's why he cannot form any relationship. Trust is a big issue for him or her. Okay, and so without trust, how can you develop, a personal relationship with a person? It's tough. And somatization. You know what somatization is? Yeah. The psychological experience is manifested physically. Remember what I was telling you with our female in our TC who were rushed to the hospital because they were complaining of abdominal pain? All right? And they were really, 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 I mean, if you look at them, they were hysterical, and really feeling the pain. We rushed them to the emergency room. They were kept overnight. The next day, we asked the doctor, did you find anything wrong? Nothing. And then later on, me at least, I figured it out only recently. It was actually the body. You know the saying, the body remembers? The body remembers. So, very likely that was the result of sexual assault or incest. Probably it was very painful when they were sexually assaulted, right? And the physical body remembers the pain. So in treatment, something triggered that person, our female client triggered the person, and then, experienced the physical pain. The thing is, that was not one event. We had quite a few of those events. Quite a few. So these people have been, sexually assaulted, abused, right? And then they feel like it was their fault. They feel guilty, right? They feel dirty. They feel damaged. So, and if when they are not actually in recovery yet, they are not well established in the recovery, and other components of spiritual religion, it heightens that sense of guilt, right? They cannot look at religion in the same way we do, because in their mind it says, why did God let this happen to me? Why did God let this happen to me? I didn't do anything. Why? Why me? So they're still grappling with that issue. So if you introduce religion in there, they're not gonna take that in the way we normally take religion. It will increase their sense of guilt. Okay, that's what that means. The systems of meaning is broken. They cannot take things in proper perspective. Okay. All right. Whoa, it's 9 o'clock. How, how about we take a break here? Yeah, it's a good thing, right? All right, 9:30. Be back at 9:30, please. This Okay, we extended break until 9:45 because it was late. Okay. Hello, family. Kumusta yung lugaw? Kulang daw sa itlog. Sabi ni Gilbert, kulang daw sa itlog. Okay. Hindi lugaw yung kailangan mo. All right, so let's continue our lecture. Okay, this is the prevalence of childhood sexual abuse. Okay? Out in the community. The purple are women and red men. So out in the community, it says there about the larger community, prevalence. About 28%. That's high for women. Women always outpace the men, and men would be about, I would say, 18%. I would not, again, I take this with a grain of salt. Number one, men are the last people who talk about trauma. Yeah. Women are more likely to talk about it than men. Okay, so that's why it's lower there. More women out in the community, the general community. Now, in the treatment for mental illness, meaning treatment programs that provide treatment for mental illness, look at the rates, the prevalence of women. About 49% in women in mental health treatment reported childhood sexual abuse. We're talking about just childhood sexual abuse. And then for men, we have 20% among those in a mental health program. Now look at the substance abuse program. Very dramatic, right? For women, we are talking about 70% of women in substance abuse treatment who reported childhood sexual abuse. And men only reported 20%. Okay? Again, I take it with a grain of salt. Especially sexual abuse. For men, they would, I don't think they'll be able to just be honest about it. Okay, now HIV, it's the other way around. More men reporting among people who reported HIV or positive in HIV, more men than women reported childhood sexual abuse. And that would be about 49%, whereas women only about 31%. Okay, these are prevalence of trauma, childhood sexual trauma. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so we started talking about ACE yesterday. So let's continue the discussion on it. Adverse Childhood Events, or ACE. The ACE study, probably one of the most important public health studies you've never heard of. You never heard of it, right? Before this, never heard of it. But it was a big deal. Had its origins in an obesity clinic on a quiet street in San Diego. Okay? Talking about serendipity, They did not know about trauma until they did that program for obesity. I was describing that to you yesterday, remember? Yeah, that women, would lose their weight significantly. And then when they started to look attractive, right? And men started courting them, they suddenly put back on the weight. And then that was puzzling for the researchers until they looked deeper and found out that many of these women were sexually abused. So they figured that the best way to prevent them from being sexually abused again is to put on weight so that they're not so attractive anymore. 50% dropout rate in the obesity clinic that Phility started in 1980. 50% dropout rate. Why would people who were 300 pounds overweight lose 100 pounds and then drop out when they were on a roll? So that question, basically, the search for an answer for that led us to what we know now as ACE, because that kind of opened the door for more study on trauma. And they discovered that it's so prevalent. Actually, it was a rediscovery because Herman, in his book Trauma and Recovery, talk about the prevalence of trauma, even, in what, that was what, 18th century, when Freud was actually practicing about there. So Freud knew already the prevalence of trauma. He was mute about it because his patients were like royalties. I mean, they belong to the upper crust. Remember what he called it? Hysteria, right? I called it hysteria, right? They were showing symptoms of trauma. And he called it hysteria. He knew, but it was not safe for him to talk about it. He decided to dig deep into the dropouts' medical records. This revealed a couple of surprises. All the dropouts had been born at a normal weight. Normal weight. So what happened? They didn't gain weight slowly over several years. They suddenly put on weight. I think that was after they were sexually assaulted, right? So they were not really overweight at a young age, and they did not put on weight gradually. It was sudden. Most of the participants had been sexually abused as children. Most had started gaining weight as a result of the abuse and gained it very quickly. Eating soothed their anxiety, fear, anger, or depression. It worked like alcohol or tobacco or methamphetamines. Who can relate to that? That food actually soothes anxiety and yeah? Yeah. That's why yes, right? Oh. Yeah. We eat our hearts out when we are unhappy and depressed. That's why we have such words as comfort food, right? Comfort food. Okay. It's just amazing that Filipinos are not obese. Not too many are obese. Because food is very much part of our everyday life, right? I can bet you when I go to your offices and open your drawers, I know you have Skyplex hidden somewhere. Skyplex. We make a joke of that. We love Skyplex, even in the US. I love Skyplex. I do. It's nice texture. It's nice to put like any jam on top of it, and then I add some cheese, the sweet and salty combined. Oh, I love that with coffee. I'm in paradise. Okay. So I bet you guys do the same thing. Okay, so even in the US, the Filipinos, they do the same thing. The American says, you want snack? Go to so-and-so stable and pull out the drawer. And you'll find something there anytime. These findings led to a mega study by the CDC. It would provide more understanding about the lives of hundreds of millions of people around the world who use biochemical coping methods, such as alcohol, marijuana, food, sex, tobacco, violence, work, methamphetamines, thrill sports, to escape intense fear, anxiety, depression, and anger. that study was, see, you know what CDC is, right? Center for, okay. So that's a huge government agency. When they get involved in a project, that's project is usually big, okay? So, and the results of that study is what we are using now in trauma-informed programs, okay? So we should actually spread that in the Philippines and become more like trauma-informed in our approaches, especially in treating clients with, even with medical problems, because, like I said, food, drugs, especially and other stuff becomes like our outlet for dealing with stressful experiences, particularly traumatic experiences. That's the name of the insurance company, Kaiser Permanente. Insurance company is huge in the West Coast, and the CDC. Large-scale epidemiological study of the influence of stressful and traumatic childhood experience. Look at the number of subjects, 17,000 people. That's huge. Motivated by an obesity study. So it started from there, and looking at obesity, and before you know it, they're looking at other stuff too. Okay, so about 2/3 of the adults in the study, 2/3, had experienced one or more types of adverse childhood experience. 2/3. So that would be about what? 75? No, 60, yeah, 66, around there. Yeah. Of that number, at least have one or more types. That's a large number of people. 60, more than 50% of our population had at least one adverse effects, a childhood experience in life. So it's pervasive, right? Of those 87% had experienced two or more types. Now you remember your score, right? Quite a few of you have 2. Some even 3 or 4, right? For example, it showed that people who had an alcoholic father were likely to have also experienced physical abuse or verbal abuse. We know that, right? It's common, across the board, even in the U.S. That if the father is alcoholic, very likely they tend to be abusive also with members of the family. Okay? In other words, ACE usually didn't happen in isolation. Okay, so yeah, there are factors that actually contribute to the occurrence of early childhood adverse experience. Okay, let's look at the demographics of that study. Remember, 17,000 sample population. So female, 54% of that sample, and 46% were males. Let's look at the race. You notice anything interesting? Look at the race breakdown. Predominantly white. So they cannot claim that all this incest, abuse, adverse experience happen among poor people only, and black people, right, and the minority. Predominantly white. Okay? 74.8%. Hispanic, 11.2%. Asia Pacific, 7.2%. African American, 4.5%. And others, 2.3%. Predominantly white folks. Okay? Look at the age. In that study, right? When they took the study, age 19 to 29, 5.3%. Ages 30 to 39.9, 40%, 49%. Oh, wait a minute. 9.8%. Now, 40 to 49, 18.6. Okay? Ano ang pinakamalaking population? 60 and over. 60 and over. 46.4. This is a retrospective thing, right? Remember, the age is from age 1 to 18. So these are respondents to that, 60 and over, 46.4%. Okay? Okay, that is kind of significant, right? Now look at the education. Not high school graduate, 7.2. No high school graduate. High school graduate, 17.6. Now, look at some college degree, 35.9, and look at the college, they're almost 40%, right? So again, this is not about just the poor people. Okay, these are regular, ordinary Americans. You know, right? And all of this adverse childhood experience happen. Generally, you know, the thinking is, oh, a lot of this childhood adverse experience happens among poor people and the minorities. Not according to this. Okay? Questions in the ACE study. All ACE questions refer to the respondents' first 8. Look at abuse, household challenges, neglect, and neglect. Actually, those three, right? Okay. Emotional abuse. The abuse is broken down into emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. Okay? A parent, emotional abuse, a parent, step-parent, or adult living in your home swore at you, insulted you, put you down, or acted in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt. That's the emotional abuse. Physical abuse, a parent, step-parent, or adult living in your home pushed, grabbed, slapped, threw something at you, or hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured. That's a physical abuse. Sexual abuse, an adult, relative, family, friend, or stranger who was at least 5 years older touched or fondled your body in a sexual way, made you touch his body or her body in a sexual way, attempted to have any type of sexual intercourse with you. Very specific, right? Very clear criteria. Okay, so that's the abuse part of that questionnaire. That's household challenges. Okay, you have mother treated violently by their partners. Okay, and then you have household substance abuse in the family, and then you have mental illness in household. Somebody living in a household who is mentally ill, and then parental separation or divorce, and then criminal household member, somebody in the house selling drugs or being convicted of a crime. You know, that thing about parental separation or divorce, sometimes we think like that in the US, the kids are not affected so much, right? Because it's so common. It's not true. The kids take it very, very hard when the parents separate. I know that because when I work, like I said, in the rehab, especially with adolescents, and very often, you know, the escalation of the drug abuse is related to problems between parents, especially if the parents ended up separated or being divorced. So it affects them. And I'm sure anywhere you go, I think children are affected by the separation of parents. Okay? Okay, so, and that's a question in ACE that can be very traumatizing, especially when the separation happens when the children are still very young. And then neglect, two kinds of neglect, emotional neglect and physical neglect. Okay? All right. Now, so you notice in the questionnaire, there were added items about calamities. Yeah. See, they don't have that there. But for us, I think it's, you know, we cannot ignore it. In other words, right? In our particular reality, yeah, we cannot ignore calamities, typhoons and its impact, because there are a lot of Filipinos traumatized by that. You know, I mean, just even it happened here, right? Not long ago, the water rose very high, right? I mean, you got caught in the middle of it, and you don't know whether the water will keep rising, rising, and rising, and there is no rescue in sight, right? It's so terrifying to experience that. Okay, right? I experienced that myself. You know, back in 1954, there was a typhoon that hit my province, and specific to my where I live, where because of the typhoon's strength, the water rose very fast, right, and wiped out a whole island, a small island, wiped out a whole island, and wiped out all the people that live. We were living in a coastal village at that time, fishing village, right? Our house were just like swallowed by the water. Yeah, but we were able to evacuate just like a few, just before that happened. So my parents had a sense to move out. Some people were not so lucky. They stayed, right? So my father evacuated us. It was so quick because she took us on a higher ground, right? It's not like probably about 1 kilometer or something like that. Then she said he tried to walk back to get some stuff from the house. And so he said, I couldn't find the house anymore. It was all underwater. So we missed it by just, probably missed it for about an hour or less. I would have been talking to you before if that happened. That was scary. I remember, walking in the middle of that typhoon, right? I was walking up the hill, going to the higher ground, higher place, and I asked my mom, how come the rain hurts me? I was complaining. I said, the rain is hurting me. And she just ignored me. And we kept walking. I don't think she understands why also. And I figured it out down the road later on, right? You know why it was the rain was hurting me? The wind was strong, right? And all the sand was stirred up by the wind, mixed with the rain, and the rain and the sand was hitting me. And I thought it was just the rain hitting me. It was both the rain and the sand hitting me. And I was so scared walking that 1 kilometer up. I remember that, and I was just like a little a chick trying to follow my mom. Maybe a pathetic figure at the time, And that was so scary. And that was the most scary part. And then there were a few other times when we evacuated also. So it's common, I'm sure that's not it has happened to quite a lot of us. Earthquake, there was an earthquake also. I think I was in college then. The Ruby Tower, some of you don't know about that. A lot of Filipinos died. That was in Avenida Rizal in Manila. That earthquake threw me out of my bed. That's how strong it was. I was lying down and then threw me out of my bed. And I said, end of the world. This is the end of the world. So these are all natural disasters, right? So I'm just telling you that, it's a significant experience to many Filipinos, right? So I think we should add that in that ACE, right? So natural calamities. So if we actually do that, then maybe, somebody make a study and say, oh, we added this, and we look at the items and, it contributes to the whole questionnaire. Then it's a groundbreaking thing, And then we have a revised ACE, ACE R. Okay, so I hope somebody picks up on that one. Okay. All right, so adverse childhood experiences. 11% experience emotional abuse. 11%. Let's see which has the highest percentage score. Experience physical abuse, 28% of the population, right? And then sexual abuse, 21. Emotional neglect, 50%, 15%. Experience physical neglect, 10. 13% witness their mothers being treated violently. 27 grow up with someone in the household using alcohol and or drugs. 19% grew up with a mentally ill person in the household. And then 23% lost a parent due to separation or divorce. Okay? And 5% grew up with a household member in jail or prison. What's the highest? Someone living with somebody on alcohol and drugs. That's the highest, right? No. Yeah, you're right. Physical abuse. Yeah, physical abuse is the highest. So it's rampant, right? Physical abuse. And then next is growing up with somebody with alcohol. Look at the divorce, right? So it tells you that they are really affected by divorce. Even in a country where, it's acceptable, it's quite common, right? Still, children are affected by that separation. It's so common in my even where I live, right? In my neighborhood, I would say people we know. How common is it from people we know? I would say, from people we know, I would say 30% of people we know in the U.S. are either divorced or separated. That's how common it is. Okay? But it doesn't mean that it doesn't affect their children. It does. Okay? Okay, so adverse, again, these people who have significant trauma based on the ACE score, they were twice as likely to be smokers. Okay? 12 times more likely to have attempted suicide. Okay? And 7 times more likely to be alcoholic. 10 times more likely to have injected street drugs. People with high ACE scores are more likely to be violent, to have more marriages, more broken bones, more drug prescriptions, more depression, more autoimmune system disease, and more work absences. Okay, sino dito ang madalas absent, ha? Sino yon? Okay. All right. I know some of you scored high, right, on the ACE. Ang alin? More likely to be late at work. Okay. So some of you actually, when I was looking at how many people scored, right? There are a significant number. If I combine people who raise their hands from those who actually have 2, 3, 4, there are quite several people here who scored, significantly for A's. But how come none of you are violent? None of you are alcoholics? I hope so. Wait a minute. Okay. What happened? Okay. No, I'm saying, the fact that you have work, you're employed, right? You're functional, that is, that tells something about your resilience. Yes. Okay, because some people scored high on A's, but they do not show dysfunctional behavior. They do not have all of those. These are statistical things, right? Because thank God there is such thing as resilience. Yeah. Okay, so that tells you that those who scored high and still are functional, and obviously you are productive, no? That speaks of your resilience. Okay, so like I said yesterday, it is it's in short supply. Not everybody is gifted with that resilience. Okay, so it's a testament to your resilience for those of you who scored significant, had significant score on A's. Okay, yeah, yes, Gilbert.
Parang nakita ko dun sa data, Doc, is mas nagdi-disclose ang mga, pag mas may age ka na, mas madali kang mag-disclose kaysa dun sa mga,
That's true, because the assumption is you're wiser, yeah. You're more mature, right? Yeah. Diba, as you age, you become like when you are young. So, yeah, I mean, when you're older, you kind of, you don't care so much about what other people say, right? Yeah, you're like so sure about yourself that you don't care about what people say or think about you, diba? So whereas when you're young, like 16, you think that the world is watching you all the time, right? Yeah, so you're so self-conscious all the time. The way you dress, the way you look, and the whole thing, right? That's when you are a teenager, about 16 until about probably 18. Then when you become like 40 years old, right? You begin to say, "Oh, I'm my own person. I don't care about what people say. And then when you reach about 60 or 70, you realize nobody really pay attention, right? Yeah, and all along you wasted so much energy that you thought the world is always watching you. But in old age you realize nobody is paying attention after all. Okay. Interesting, right? Okay, so moving on. Okay, again, A score. Yeah. Early death could be a factor. You know why? Remember what I said? Remember what I said about because people who are severely traumatized, they suffer also a lot of medical issues, medical problems. So here is the thing with trauma. You can be very resilient, right? But if you have a stressful life growing up, it will somehow affect you in later age. You'll show some of those medical issues, hypertension, diabetes. Okay, so you cannot escape that. You probably were able to live a normal life, achieve your career, but health wise, you cannot reverse it. If you had a lot of cortisol in your body growing up during those stressful times, you cannot reverse the effect of that. The thing though is you can actually change your lifestyle. Okay, so if you have a lot of those stress in your life, watch out for your health because it's gonna show up later on. Okay, all right, but live healthy, stay healthy, and you'll be fine. Okay. All right, so we're talking about these are the outcome of high score on ACE. Okay, social, emotional, and cognitive impairment results to that. adoption of health risk behaviors. Okay? Why? Alcohol becomes like a common thing, smoking, and also, you as a way of regulating your emotions. Sometimes people don't. You engage in high risks hobbies. Yeah, high risk hobbies. It's like yeah. So you are more. Yeah, you take more risks because it's a way of also regulating yourself. You don't know that, it's a self-regulatory thing. You feel good about yourself. Disease and disability and social problems that can occur, and then early death. But if you do not take care of yourself, that's what's gonna happen. All those medical problems will pile up on you. Okay. All right. So and yeah, they studied that. That's part of the study. Trauma and physical health, particularly chronic sexual and physical abuse in childhood, affects adult rates of heart disease. Okay? Cancer, gastrointestinal disorders, chronic pain. Okay? So, I'm 75, right? I have a lot of stress growing up. I have some of that. Okay? So I know it's the stress from growing up. I know that. So the gastrointestinal disorders, definitely. I have severe acid reflux. That's why I cannot drink regular coffee. I cannot drink alcohol. So I discipline myself. I love those stuff, but I discipline myself not to take it because then it's gonna get worse, right? So cancer is related to actually the immune system. Remember, the immune system is affected when you have high A score, right? So you are susceptible to cancer. Of course, other factors contribute to that, like genetics and all of that. Chronic pain, just joints and all of that, right? As you grow older. Okay, so all those things can be managed. The heart disease thing, thank God, my family has good heart, strong heart. History of heart disease. Okay, clinically significant symptoms. A score and smoking. All right. So the higher the A score, the more tendency to smoke. Okay, the higher the score. Why? Why? Because what does smoking do to you? Yes, it's a self-regulatory thing. Okay, so you don't know it, right? If you have high score, you could be a highly anxious person. Highly anxious. And you are not even aware of it. And if you have a high anxiety and you easily get anxious, it's the best thing. Smoking, right? Okay, so yeah, so but luckily, I'm not into smoking. It's not my thing. Luckily. Okay. A score and alcoholism. Another one. Look at that. 4 or more. Alcohol. Self-regulatory, right? Alcohol. If you are a highly anxious person, have a little bit and you feel fine. Right? Okay. So, but what happens with that? First, it helps you self-regulate yourself, but eventually it becomes a habit. That's the thing. Same thing with cigarettes. You use it to self-regulate yourself, but before you know it, you become a chain smoker. And same thing with alcohol. So it's very easy for us to become alcoholic. Okay, again, like I said, I love to drink, but I can't. My acid reflux will kill me if I continue to drink. But I love wine. I never abused alcohol. I was smart enough to not really push it. Okay. So, resilience. I think, somebody in my head is telling me, you can't do that. You can't do that. But, who never indulge in, when you are young, like you always dare each other who can drink. That, right? Right? All of us went through that. You dare each other, who can drink more. And before you know it, you become a regular drinker. Right? So, okay. Adverse childhood experiences related to alcoholism, alcohol abuse. Look at the number of things. This is the higher your score, the more high risk you are to develop any of those. Okay? Alcoholism and alcohol abuse. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Depression. Okay? Okay, so some people are depressed, but they are not aware they're depressed. Okay, that's the thing though with depression. You've got to be keen enough to catch it. Okay, because your tendency is to medicate yourself when you are depressed. So, but if you have some awareness that you're depressed, you can actually do certain things so you don't actually fall into drinking and indulging with drugs. Fetal death. I guess that is like giving birth to, for women, right? Giving birth, they have that a fetal death. The fetus just dies. Health-related quality of life. That's what I'm talking about. It impacts our quality of life because you develop some of these diseases. Cannot avoid it, but you can manage it. Ischemic heart disease, you know what that is? Obstructive heart disease, right? That's what it is. Liver disease, poor work performance. Aha. Poor work performance. Okay. Why? It's related to your health. So if you're always sick, right, then you cannot do your work very well. Financial stress also. The lack of ability to manage your money. Risk for intimate partner violence. Yeah, because if you were actually physically or emotionally abused growing up, you tend to repeat that pattern. Multiple sexual partners. Okay. Sexually transmitted diseases. Smoking, very common. Suicide attempts. And now we're talking about people who get very depressed. That's why I was telling you, you've got to be a little bit aware about your depression, right? And then, you're already depressed. You started indulging in alcohol, using alcohol, too much alcohol. So it will just exacerbate that. Unintended pregnancies. Okay, a lot of those females who had severe sexual trauma, they're likely to have early pregnancies. And early initiation of smoking, they started to smoke early. Early initiation of sexual activity, they are very sexually promiscuous, okay, even early in life. Adolescent pregnancy, common among them. Risk of prosexual violence, and poor academic achievement. Okay, so mind you, those are actually the outcome of the study. Okay, so the A's. So I take those because 17,000 samples is a huge number of people. So the results should be, significant really. It's just amazing, that we only found out about it not long ago, in the 90s, but actually when it started, okay? The brain and ACE score. Cognitive and neurological researchers have examined possible mechanisms that might explain the negative consequences of adverse childhood experience on adult health. Okay, so they're trying to make the connection, right? So what's the relationship of adverse childhood experience on the health of people? Adverse childhood experiences can alter the structure of the neural development networks and the biochemistry of neuroendocrine system and may have long-term effects on the body, including speeding up the process of disease and aging and compromising immune system. So those things, as you cannot reverse those, okay? Because the trigger happened way, way back. It's just, as you age, it becomes more and more and more apparent, okay? Adverse childhood experience, okay. Additionally, epigenetic transmission may occur due to stress during pregnancy. Wow. So the stress that you experience can transmit to the baby. That's what it's saying, right? During pregnancy or during interactions between mother and newborns. Maternal stress, depression, and exposure to partner violence have all been shown to have epigenetic effects on infants. So the infants actually inherit, all those negative experience, that the results of traumatic experience from the mother transmitted to the baby. That's what epigenesis is. Okay, so there are more and more studies done on transmission of life experiences into the next generation, which means for that to happen, the DNA has to be altered, correct? Because that's how we transmit attributes, right? Skills, capacities, intellectual abilities, all of that. Di ba, sinabi niya, maganda ang genes mo. Something like that. Maganda ang genes mo. Okay. So, it means that, the transmission is to the genes. So, the thing though is, can experience actually alter the genes? That's the question. That's what epigenesis is trying to answer. That somehow, experience can actually alter the structure of your DNA. We're talking about that. Right? So, historical trauma and colonial trauma is big on this, epigenesis. So there are more and more studies coming out proving that actually experience can be transmitted to the genes. Okay? So, that is significant, right? That your own trauma, because it altered the structure of your genes. So, let's say in my case, can be transmitted to my children, right? Okay, because they have part of my genes and part my wife. So, if I had a stressful life and it kind of altered my genes, right? It can transmit to the baby. And if your partner had the same trauma, nako, it's even worse, right? So, yeah. Okay, so I suspect there will be more and more studies on this coming out. There are already some coming out about epigenesis. So, it's an interesting study because we believe for a long time that the DNA is stable, right? That's what we learn in school, right? That it is permanent, that is set. That's what we learn in school. But more and more, that belief is being challenged because they are showing a lot of evidence that some traits and experiences are transmitted through the genes. And that transmission is through the DNA, right? So the DNA must have changed. So they're talking about, that's what they're talking about, epigenetic. Okay. Where's my thing? Okay, the next one, Other studies. Other clinical studies found that patients with higher levels of childhood trauma have higher rates of PTSD. Substance dependence, especially alcohol, cocaine, and cannabis, and are more likely to report injecting drug use. Women who report having been raped report higher levels of PTSD, major depression, and alcohol abuse compared to others with child victimization histories, but who have not been raped. So, rape is really very traumatic, right? Because several adverse consequences. Women in a residential treatment facility, 95%, had experienced some type of trauma, and 75% still met full criteria for PTSD. That's very high. This is in another study. People in treatment. So women really in residential treatment, it says here, are highly traumatized population. Okay, so I don't know what's the rate of success of our program for women. There is another, a TRC, Malinaw has females. I wonder, what the outcomes. I'll ask them. What's their success with women, no? We have, we don't have a whole lot of women in the TRCs. It's not because there are less women. They are less likely to come and volunteer for treatment. That's what it is. Risk factors, a combination of individual, relational, community, and societal factors contribute to the risk of child abuse and neglect. Risk factors are those characteristics associated with child abuse and neglect. They may or may not be direct causes. Okay? All right, so what are the risk factors for becoming a victim? Individual risk factor, children younger than 4 years of age. Why? They're vulnerable. They don't also complain. They don't, they're likely to just keep quiet. Okay? So they are really a target for victimization. Special needs that may increase caregiver burden, disabilities, mental retardation, mental health issues, and chronic physical illness. Okay, so if your caregiver have those, the child is more likely to experience adverse life experience. Family risk factors. Parents' lack of understanding of children's needs, child development, and parenting skills. We keep seeing this and keep reinforcing our idea to include parenting skills in our program as a prevention, for this to continue. Parents' history of child maltreatment in family of origin. So if the parents have been maltreated or experienced abuse or trauma growing up, what are the likelihood of this repeating itself? Very high, right? So just think of how many of our residents have had adverse life experiences, victims of abuse, neglect, right? Growing up, they're likely to actually repeat that pattern. Okay? Substance abuse or mental health issues, including depression in the family. That's a risk factor. Anybody, one parent or any member of the family who experience or suffer from depression can be a risk factor. People with mental illness, no? The young kids, many of them are actually victims of abuse. Okay? Parental characteristics such as young age, low education, single parenthood, large number of dependent children, and low income. They are high risk for abuse or becoming a victim. It's almost like a description of many of our, the demographics of many of our clients, correct? Many of our clients belong to that category. non-biological transient caregivers in the home. You know, sometimes the abuser are actually family friend who happen to be just hanging out in the family. We have that. That's common in the Philippines, right? So and so, not really related. Just come to the city and they say they're looking for a job, right? Okay, and then they ended up abusing some of those children. Okay. Social isolation, a family that doesn't have really enough support system, okay, detached or removed from civilization, okay, the children there is at risk. Family disorganization, dissolution, and violence, including intimate partner violence. Parenting stress, poor parent-child relationship, and negative interactions. Yung hindi magkakasundo sa bahay. No? Very chaotic household. Okay? That's a veritable ground for adverse child experience. Parental thoughts and emotions that tend to support or justify maltreatment behaviors. Okay? So, some of the parents, because they had stressful life, they actually project a lot of those issues that they have. They take it on the children, and many of them sometimes they feel the children are a burden, right? And then that with that attitude, if they feel that way, very likely they'll end up abusing their children. Okay, out of stress, or they cannot, or they struggle supporting the children. They're not making enough money, right? And the family is big. Parents, their frustration end up being taken out on children, right? And then community risk factors, community violence. I was describing to you where I grew up. It was common, fights were common when I was growing up. It wasn't a safe environment. I seen a lot of violence growing up in that community. So just witnessing some of these things, I guess, was traumatizing. I didn't look at it that way before, but looking back, yeah, that was stressful. Looking at those people getting killed. Concentrated neighborhood disadvantage, high poverty and residential instability, high unemployment rates, high density of alcohol outlets, and poor social connections. We're talking about the slums, right? Have you seen the slums in Manila? Oh, yeah. It's hard to imagine how people live in that environment, right? So it's almost like it's hard to imagine, right? And then you think about this. A lot of these things are happening in those communities. That community is so unstable, very little support system. Okay, so there are protective factors. Okay, so what are family protective factors? You know what protective factors are? Things that can prevent, minimize, ameliorate, right? Okay, so the first one is nurturing parenting skills. We're back to parenting skills again. Okay, so when the parents have enough skills to raise their children, right? Even in a very difficult environment, the children thrives. And then stable family relationship, poor but stable family relationships. So even in a slum area, if the family is stable, right, that is a protective factor. Okay, and they get along, that's a protective factor. Household rules and child monitoring. There are specific rules at home. Curfew is it's very important. Okay, the children are expected to be home at a certain time. And then the children follows that or obeys that rule. Okay? So, and then the mother or the parents constantly monitor their children. In other words, they know their children anytime where they are. And the children ask permission from parents where they're going. Okay? So, I was just trying to remember. You know, my mom has a very strict rule about that. So, before it gets dark, you should be home. If you're going anywhere, ask permission. So, I remember, you know, when I go to other places, I know my mom would not let me, right? Would not let me. My best friend, my mom loved my best friend, right? Trusted my best friend. So I would ask my best friend, ask my mom. If I asked, she would say, no. If my best friend asks her, he says, okay. Yeah. So, but we have the rules. You know, and I respect the rules. I just don't disappear. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't want my mom to worry also. But I respect the rules. But, you know, those little things, you know, help a lot. So even though, you know, it was a crazy time, but she has very clear expectation of us, discipline-wise. Okay, parental employment. This is another one. No, parents are employed. That is actually why is that a protective factor? Employment. More resources in the family. More resources. The chances of dad abusing alcohol is less because he has to work. Right? But if there is no work, that's when you see them doing that. Adequate housing, another one. Going back to the slums. Oh my God, right? No toilet, no privacy, no clean water. Yeah, so those people there, a lot of them are traumatized just by that. Okay, so those lack of facilities contributes to a lot of this problem as well. Access to healthcare and social services is another one. Unfortunately, it's hard to come by here, right? Yeah, so that contributes to that. Yeah, caring adults outside the family who can serve as role models or mentors. Interestingly, some people, right, might actually, kids grow up in a home that is so chaotic, right? But he's very resilient, for example. But he seeks out people in the community that becomes like a surrogate caregiver. Yeah. So some people actually would experience this in treatment, right? When I was admitting an adolescent, and when you ask him who is a significant person to you, he would tell me somebody like so and so. I said, who is he? Is he a relative? No, it's just a friend. Oh, why is that important to you? Well, when I have a problem, I go to him. I talk to him. Not a family member. Just a man in the neighborhood who happened to care about the kid. So if you have that, even though the house is crazy, but maybe there is an uncle or a grandparents who are very supportive, that can help the kid survive. Okay? And that has happened quite a bit. Okay, clinical challenges in the treatment of traumatic stress and addiction. Abstinence might not resolve comorbid trauma-related disorders. You know that, right? They might stop abusing drugs, but the symptoms will persist. Okay, because that means that symptoms is separate from the drugs. It's not drug-induced. For many patients, the PTSD worsens when they stop taking drugs. Okay? So the first month in treatment for people with severe trauma is very challenging. Why? You actually took away from them the number one thing that they use to cope, drugs. So they go into a crisis. They become very unstable in the first month of treatment because of that. Okay? But that hopefully that would actually improve. So that's where the psychiatrist's role comes in. Okay, and the initial part of treatment. So in your assessment, if the person has been medicating himself with drugs because of all those symptoms he has, don't just stop, when he comes in, you have to actually assess what's his need to stabilize his mood, right? Just stabilize his mood until he can adjust to the environment, and hopefully once he is adjusted to the environment, you can wean him off the medication. That's the idea, right? Not to put that person on medication the entire time, unless, in your assessment, the mental health issue has nothing to do with the drug. It's a separate thing, right? You know what I'm saying? It's not a drug-induced psychiatric symptoms. It's been there even before he started using drugs. And probably the reason why he started using drugs is because he wanted to medicate his symptoms, correct? So it's a little, you have to know what you're doing, basically. Okay? And then sometimes there's no way of knowing until, the person is admitted. So the rule of thumb is if the symptoms persist without him using drugs, if persists for about more than 30 days, it is not drug-induced, right? That's actually the rule of thumb. So then you rule out now that this is a drug-related symptoms. So if it is not drug-related symptoms, then rightfully so, you can put him on medication, right? Yeah, but you don't just put him on medication without assessing the situation. So it's kind of a little tough when working with these people with comorbid condition. And the comorbidity is sometimes trauma related. Okay? So it gets very complicated. So you kind of give yourself time to really observe the person. So psychiatrists who work in our program, are very familiar with substance abuse. Do you know we used to have psychiatrists, they don't know about substance abuse. They don't know anything about substance abuse, right? So you know what happened? These residents would keep going to them and complaining about, oh, doc, I cannot sleep. Oh, doc, I feel this way. They were just trying to get some medication from the doctor. And the doctor has no clue and just keep prescribing. That's not a good practice. So there is and you have a version of that. You know ASAM? ASAM? American Society of Addiction Medicine, right? Yeah. So American Society of Addiction Medicine. Do you have a counterpart for that here? Ah. Okay. I know somehow they were trying to connect with the ASAM in the US. At one point, our psychiatrist was the president of ASAM. So he knows, about substance abuse and comorbidity. But not all psychiatrists are familiar with it. So ideally, our psychiatrists should be familiar with addiction. So because it gets very confusing, especially in the initial, stage of treatment, separating between, drug-induced and organic or whatever condition, right? So that's very significant. Okay. Yeah, how many psychiatrists you have? Only si Doc lang mag-isa. Oh, you're a psychiatrist? Okay, cool. So two of you? Oh. Akala ko si Doc, you are the psychiatrist. Okay. So now I know who to malinger with. Okay, Doc. So, you know what I'm talking about, right? Residents will come to you, complain about this, that. And that's very common when I was in data. And then, to our dismay, all the psychiatrists would just keep giving them medication. And we were so unhappy with that approach. Okay. It says there. Take note of that. It says there, confrontational approaches, typically in addiction settings, frequently exacerbate mood and anxiety disorders. That's true. Okay? So, that's what we're trying to actually look at. So, how much of our approaches could be actually a triggering, could trigger symptoms of trauma? So, one is we have to understand the client, right? Understand the client. Does he have a serious trauma experience? Okay, how necessary is confrontation and what kind of confrontation? How do we conduct confrontation? All those questions. Okay? Next, 12-step models often do not acknowledge the need for pharmacologic interventions. Okay, so in some cases, it can become counterproductive. I have known of some sponsor who are diehard 12 steps who would discourage their clients from taking the medication. Okay, and obviously, you know, this 12 step how do you call that, sponsor is not familiar with substance abuse and mental health. So it's counterproductive. You cannot tell a client, hey, stop your medication, because just you don't believe in medication. So they are very like purely no drugs type of thing, no drugs at all. So pharmacology has a place in addiction treatment. Okay, especially for clients with co-occurring disorder. Like I said, you need a very thorough evaluation of the client to separate, things, sort it out, and then which one is a legitimate target for medication. And if it's a legitimate target for medication, that client must stay on it, because that will help him function better. Okay? All right. So I know some of our clients go to 12 steps, the aftercare clients, right? Yeah. And I wonder, if do they continue to take their medication after they leave the program? They do? Okay, the question there is, who supports this medication? Let's say they cannot afford it. Uh-huh. Yung may pera, it's okay. Do you do okay, that's one, no? That's one. I'm glad that they are being provided for. The other issue with that is to really educate them about medication. Okay? Because you know what they'll do? After they leave here, they'll stop taking it. And then they'll go back to using drugs, and they are likely to relapse. You know that, right? So you really have to do a thorough psychoeducation. Make sure that they understand. See, the thing with that is this is how they think. Okay? Listen, guys. Yung mga nagtagal na sa programa, right? Na confident naman kasi nakatigil siya sa pagda-drugs. Sa isip niya, bakit pa ako magte-take nito? Para bang sa kanya, isip niya, drugs din to eh. So, gusto ko talaga drug-free ako. Parang ganun ba? Hindi nila naintindihan na yung medication na yun helps him really feel the way he feels right now, be able to function. So, you have to break it down to them. We do that, back in data, psychoeducation on medication. To break it down to them and say, this is, unfortunately, your brain works a little different from other people, right? So some people, needs a little help because, something in there is misfiring, or there's a deficit, or whatever it is, of neurotransmitter. You don't have to make it very complicated. Just explain it in a way they can follow, that this is, just like some people are taking, they're susceptible to diabetes or hypertension, so ask them, does your parents take any hypertensive medication? There you go. Because that normalizes things, para walang adverse effects yung blood pressure niya. Same thing sa'yo. Parang normalize mo kasi sa kanila, ang isip lagi nila sa medication, may sira ulo eh. Right? Yeah. They equate yung medication, so may sira ulo ko. Ayoko, pag nalaman ng mga tao na may medication ako, tingin nila sa akin, may sira ulo ko. So that means that we need to kind of normalize it, right, for them. And say, no, it's really, I'm telling you, sometimes even though we educate them like that, they continue to think like, I feel good. I feel good. I don't have to take any medication. So, the other question I have is, who follows up them? Can they go to a clinic where a psychiatrist every now and then can evaluate them and see how he's making progress? Okay. So, kasi sayang yung effort natin, di ba? Natulungan natin sila maging drug-free. So very likely, pag hindi tinigil yung medication niya, ang risk of going back to drugs is very high. Yeah, so if they are, they don't understand how this works, they might just do that, okay? So, well, I'm glad, that you have that program. That's good. Treatment for only one disorder, such as exposure-based approaches, are often marked by complications. Treatment developed for PTSD alone might not be advisable to treat women with addictions. Meaning, one approach, that's what I'm talking about. That's an evidence-based, like exposure therapy. That's not enough, right? So, that just address that part. But how about the addiction part? So we have to treat both, right? Simultaneously, by the way. We're treating both conditions at the same time. Okay? It's called an integrated approach, actually. That's what you call. The other one, you treat first the mental illness and then the addiction, it's called sequential. We do not do sequential approach anymore. It's always integrated, simultaneous treatment, because they are interactive. Yeah? They contribute to each other, right? Okay. Okay, PTSD and substance use disorders, negative outcomes. More severe PTSD. The outcome generally is, negative. They are hard to treat. More addictive drugs. Those who are using really hard drugs, opiates, is particularly, okay? And then combined with their PTSD, and then they are on hard drugs, it's tough to manage them. Okay? And you just imagine, you have to, before they come into treatment, you have to send them for detox, and when they're on detox, the psychiatric problems exacerbates, it's tough, right? Managing, especially like I said, the first 30 days is just like tough for these people. Recurrent victimization and trauma. Recurrent. Paulit-ulit ba? And they constantly subject themselves to traumatic situation, okay? Have you heard of those stories? Women will keep going back to the place where they were actually assaulted. Okay, and they ended up getting assaulted. You know what's the function of that? You know why they do that? They're attempting to control the situation. They feel like, yung nangyari sa akin, hindi ko na-control yung situation, so I'm gonna go back there and see if this time I'm gonna be able to control the situation. Reenactment, that's the word. They want to reenact and see if they can actually control the situation. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. They ended up being victimized again. Okay? So, yeah. So it's called reenactment. It's the desire to establish control over the traumatic event. Shorter periods of abstinence, more frequent relapse. They cannot sustain their sobriety. Okay, relapse is common among people with severe, with PTSD. More severe psychiatric problems and symptoms with PTSD. More problems in functioning, legal, medical, works, and relationship. Those are the problems they encounter. Okay? More legal problems, a lot of medical issues, and they cannot find jobs, or if they do find jobs, they get kicked out or fired because they cannot keep up with it. And they cannot maintain relationships. Poorer treatment and peer support group benefits. Okay, so they're the most neglected people, actually. Okay, nobody wants to touch them as much as possible. People avoid because they're tough clients, especially women. Women with PTSD are tough clients, so, nobody wants to touch them. So there are poor services provided for them. Even in the VA, they do not have great. I hope it has changed in the U.S. But every now and then I hear stories of them not really getting enough services to address a lot of their life issues as a result of PTSD. Okay, in treatment, address basic needs. Right? Create trauma-informed systems. That's what we are attempting, trauma-informed systems. Evidence-based treatment. Okay? We are trying to do that. Stages of healing and treatment. Okay, so treatment from trauma is comes in stages. I would say it's developmental model. Okay, first is like establishing safety. And then next is mourning, and then I believe the next one is integration or something like that. And that can take time. And we don't have the time to go through all those stages. Like I said, what we are attempting is to help them develop coping skills so that they do not go back to drugs. And if they can stay away from drugs, their symptoms is likely to be more manageable. They go back to using drugs, their symptoms gets more severe. That's the problem with PTSD or severe trauma. More drugs, more symptoms. No principles of co-occurring treatment. Okay, we know that, right? We know that we are dealing with clients with co-occurring condition, not just substance abuse, but also psychiatric conditions that needs to be addressed at the same time. Okay, address basic needs first. Yep, we do that. We provide them with food, lodging, right? Basic needs. And then we try our best to create a safe environment, which sometimes we struggle to achieve, but that's the goal, right? And then social needs. What are those social needs? That's when they begin to aspire to become an expediter, to become a role model, to become an officer. Social needs. That doesn't happen right away. You provide the basic needs and the safety needs. Next is the social needs. They begin to seek out how they can actually contribute to the community, right? And then esteem needs. To feel I am an individual and I get some respect. Okay, so, and we provide all of those, right? So when they become like a role model, people with position, they get that. They get that respect, right? Which they never had outside. So no wonder some of them abuse it, don't they? They abuse the position Because this is the first time that they're actually given power like that. So it needs education. You need to explain to them, okay, you got into that position, you earned that, right? It gives you some power, but doesn't mean that you can abuse that. Yet, okay? We are giving that to you to help other people become like you. Okay? That's as simple as that. If you abuse it, you're not helping other people develop and reach that level like you. So you have to break it down to them. But that's a normal desire of people, right? The need for esteem. You know what's next to that? If they do it right, our clients do it right, what's the next one? Self-actualization, right? Yes? That's when actually spirituality comes in. That one, they will be open to religion. Whatever faith they have. Okay? When they reach that. That would be a natural outgrowth of rehabilitation. When they begin to ask questions like, I want to go back to my faith. You don't do that at the bottom. Okay? You do not preach religion when what they need is the basic needs. You follow what I'm saying? Basic needs. They will not appreciate religion or spirituality when what they need is basic needs. So, you see that self-actualization? It comes, when the person has achieved recovery, he is stable mentally, right? Then he begins to ask himself, what do I do next? Now I am drug-free, right? I feel good about myself. What do I do? Then they begin to think about maybe going to school. They think about career, actualization needs, career, or maybe I need to work out my relationship with my family or my children, become a good father, help them out. Self-actualization, it comes, there's a time for each one of those, right? The toughest part of that are the bottom one. The bottom one. But once they actually are motivated and they're stable, right? They are doing their job function and, they own up their treatment. They take responsibility for their treatment. That's the next one. Self-actualization. You really don't even have to preach about religion. They will seek it out. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah. It makes sense, right? Okay, so you know where that came from, right? That's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Okay, trauma-informed approach. According to Samsha, concept of trauma-informed approach, a program, organization, or system that is trauma-informed should realize widespread impact of trauma and understand potential paths for recovery. Now, you are all educated and informed about trauma, right? Recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma in clients, families, staff, and others involved with the system. Staff. Do we have trauma too? Yes? No? Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And sometimes our trauma actually drives us to actually seek out to work in the field. Seriously, right? Yeah, ask yourself. I keep asking this question. So why are you attracted to this? Why are you attracted to this work when this work is not easy? Why not just work in the office? Right? Yeah. Or work in the hospital. Have a regular routine. Right? Okay, so why are you attracted in this field? And a lot of times it's an unconscious thing, right? We don't know. But it is something, maybe we are trying to heal ourselves. Is that possible that somehow we're trying to heal something in ourselves? That's why we get attracted to this field. Is that possible? Yeah, and it's an unconscious thing. You know, you did not actually think about it. You didn't sit down and think about, oh, okay, I have this kind of problem in myself. You know, I cannot find myself. You know, you don't do that. It's just like, you know, it happen. Nothing happens with no reason, right? Everything is consequential. There is a reason for everything, and a lot of times we're driven by our unconscious motivation to find healing, to find mental health, and maybe some of us ended up here in search of that. Who knows? Right? Possible. Okay. So, we do have our own needs, right? We do. And we always say, be aware about those needs because you don't want to meet those needs through your clients. Okay? No. You know, we cannot do that, right? Okay, respond to by fully integrating knowledge about trauma into policies, procedures, and practices. Yeah, our policies should also be trauma informed. And finally, seek to actively resist re-traumatization. Okay, so avoid re-traumatizing our clients. Okay? Okay, the 6 key principles of trauma-informed approach. A trauma-informed approach reflects adherence to 6 key principles rather than a prescribed set of practices or procedures. Safety. Safety is number 1. Okay? Trustworthiness and transparency. Honesty, basically. Okay? Transparency and honesty. Peer support. Right? We always say we are only as strong as how we support each other. Okay? So, you know, that doesn't mean that there will be no conflict. There will be conflict. It's not avoidable. Right? The thing with that is how do we, in our environment, since we are promoting a trauma-informed program, how do we deal with conflict? Openness. Just be open. Right? Openness in mind and ability to listen to what other people say. And then, at the end of it, respecting each other. You know, we can disagree on certain things, but it doesn't mean that we have to be disrespectful. Okay? And it doesn't mean that because I don't agree with you that I'm disrespecting you. Okay? So, yeah. We need that. You know, to work together as one. Collaboration and mutuality. That's what I'm talking about. Collaborations and mutuality. At the end of the day, we are all together in this. We are in a boat, right? In a boat. Okay. And sometimes there is a hole in the boat. And so, you know, if there is a hole in the boat, what we do, we patch it up. But when we try to make the holes bigger, that's not good. Okay? So otherwise the boat, we will all sink together. Remember that? Okay. Okay. And then empowerment, voice and choice. Empowerment, to be empowered, to feel empowered, right? Whatever your position in the agency, you feel empowered. And that your voice is heard. Okay? And that you have a choice. And that you have a choice. That's important. Okay, next is cultural, historical, and gender issues. We're mindful of cultural realities, okay? And our past. And the past of each one of us. We have our own history, right? And then, gender issues. Women. You know, it's not quite an issue in the Philippines, gender issues. You know, I'm amazed that Filipinos can handle women power better than other cultures. I do. You know, I do believe that. You know, we had a woman president, right? Not a big deal. We had a woman president. So, dalawa, di ba? Dalawa na women president. That's quite unique. Okay, has there been any female prime minister in Thailand? No. Has there any female prime minister in Malaysia? No. Has there any female president in Indonesia? No. Only in our country, right? In Southeast Asia. Not in Vietnam, not in Cambodia. But we have had. So that means what? We have no problem with women in power. Yeah. Okay? So that's a good attitude about Filipinos. That's not an issue about gender, discriminating female. And many of the bosses are actually, look at the bosses in the TRCs. Female, mostly female. Okay. So we are progressive in that respect, right? And that is a reflection of how we hold women in our lives, right? Okay. Kasi mama's boy tayong lahat, di ba? No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going there. I'm not going there. Now, all of us have very good connection with our mother. Am I right? Am I right? Okay. Yeah. Mom is always there. So when in politics, that perspective translates into politics. We have no problem with female politicians or leaders. Same thing, because we have no problem with powerful figures in our lives, right? Our moms. Okay. Okay. Evidence-based practices for PTSD. The most efficacious psychosocial treatment is a behavior therapy, exposure therapy. But that only address the trauma, not the addiction, mind you, okay? We have to address both. Exposure therapy yields robust outcomes in most population, but has excluded persons with addictive disorders. Tinanggal nila yung addictive disorders kasi magulo daw sila. Pag ginalo mo ng trauma at addiction, it gets very complicated. So, trauma itself, they are comfortable dealing with it. Has high dropout rates. It's believed to be too stressful for many patients. Yeah. Okay? So, that's the limitation of exposure therapy. I think exposure therapy is perfect for certain psychological trauma like phobias, and something along that line, like phobias, right? Yeah, just like people are afraid of snakes, and they, right? And they cannot, handle it. Exposure therapy will work for that. But I think the other trauma experiences, how are you going to expose them to sexual abuse or something like that? Like it's impossible to do that. Okay. This is, stages of healing. Okay, these are the stages of healing trauma. Okay, first stage, safety. This is the phase you are in now. We are actually just in the first stage, right? Trying to make our program safe enough and teaching our clients coping skills. You got it? We are not into mourning. Although some clients who feel safe enough will go there without you asking them, will go there. They want to talk about what happened to them when the time comes, right? And then finally, reconnection. Those are stages. So mind you, we are only doing the first one, safety. Mourning, I know some clients might want that, right? Or, when you're doing group process, that will come out. And usually those clients have been in the program for quite some time before they even go there. Okay, so there is actually a program called Seeking Safety, I teach that program, and that is only stage 1, safety, coping skills, teaching them coping skills. We are already teaching them coping skills in the program. Okay. All right. Oh, that's seeking safety right there. I teach that in some TRCs. It's a great book, model. Developed as a group treatment for PTSD for women with substance use. Based on CBT models. Yeah, it's just cognitive behavioral approach. It's highly educational. It educates clients about PTSD and substance abuse. Okay. The goal is also safe abstinence and focus on coping skills. Okay, so that is seeking safety. And then we have DBT, skills training in a variety of areas such as mindfulness, focus on the here and now, mindfulness. It would be great to do mindfulness exercise, right? Mindfulness. It's very simple, actually. There's a simple way of doing mindfulness. And then interpersonal effectiveness. We do, somehow, we teach our clients that, interpersonal effectiveness, how to get along with other people, right? With other residents. Emotion regulation. Distress tolerance. Skills-based program that addresses the here and now issues of the client. Oh, okay. So some of these things we already touched on our program, right? Principles of co-occurring disorder or treatment. Dual diagnosis is an expectation, not an exception. Right now, we expect our clients to present other mental health issues besides substance abuse. When substance disorders and psychiatric disorders coexist, each disorder should be considered primary. Okay? Primary. And integrated dual primary treatment is recommended. That's what we're trying to do, right? Integrated treatment, where each disorder receives appropriate intensive diagnosis is specific to treatment. Okay? So we are already doing that, right? Okay, it's an integrated. So clients are evaluated, right, for their both areas, substance abuse and mental health issues, right? Ano nangyari? Is that the last one? Huh? Bakit ayaw? Okay. Employ a recovery perspective. Okay, we are a recovery perspective, by the way. The TC is a recovery-oriented approach. Both substance dependence and serious mental illness are examples of primary, chronic, biologic mental illnesses, which can be understood using a disease in recovery model. Okay, so are we a disease concept? Is addiction a disease? Yeah. Well, to me, it's actually a brain disease. It is, right? Okay. So the goal is, when you say recovery model, means that we are helping our clients overcome addiction with no substitute for it. Because there are models that substitutes to addiction, like methadone. Okay? That's a substitution model. We are a recovery model. Okay. There is no one type of dual diagnosis program or intervention. Adopt a multi-problem and treatment viewpoint. For each person, the correct treatment intervention must be individualized according to subtype of dual disorder and diagnosis, phase of recovery, stage of treatment, level of functioning, skills or disability, plus goals, problems, and contingencies associated with its disorder. Okay. So we do actually individualize our treatment. It's actually in our treatment plan, right? And that treatment plan covers also his psychiatric, psychological, and medical needs, right? Okay, so develop a paced approach to treatment. Are we a paced approach of treatment? Paced? Do we have phases? Yes, we do. Okay, so that is what's recommended. Address specific real-life problems early in treatment. What are those real-life problems? Real-life problems. Employment is one. Yeah. What else? Family is another. Employment, family, right? Medical? Yes. Okay, so it's all outlined in the ASI. Legal, yeah, it's called domains, right? The 7 domains. Okay. So it's in our treatment plan. We address all of those. Correct? Plans for the client's cognitive and functional impairments. Okay, so our clients are not really severely cognitively impaired, correct? Because we cannot accept clients who are severely cognitively impaired. If they cannot, function in our structure, we do not keep them in the program. Correct? So if the psychiatric condition is severe, that they are cognitively impaired, we refer them somewhere else. Now, some people might be, we can help them function better through medication. We can try that and see if it works, right? And if after trying that, the person still cannot function, we have to refer the person out. Yeah. Use support system to maintain and extend treatment effectiveness. Okay, so in aftercare, we actually encourage them to develop their support system, right? Yeah. And in fact, we have to identify early in treatment who their support system. Okay? Do not actually do that late. Once they are actually in treatment, begin to really look at who are the potential support system for the clients. Sometimes you need to actually invite them, encourage them to come and participate in the program. And that's where you educate them about the program, right? You have to tell them about addiction. All right? So, yeah. Do that early on in treatment so that when the client is ready to be released for aftercare, you already have right there a viable support system for our clients. Okay? Whoa, we finished it. Yes. Substance abuse and trauma. Now, questions. Yes, Dr. Jelen.
Doc, when is the best time to do the ACE? I mean, if you do that earlier, you might add insult to the trauma. And if you're going to do that late, you might be late also in the approaches that you're going to do. And how about with adolescents? I mean, they're much honest and much open to, probably of their experiences. So maybe with adolescents, you could do it at much earlier time as compared with the adult. I mean, what could be your insight with this?
Okay, in both cases, adolescent or adults, I think we have to give them time to adjust to the program. Because there are some questions there, Dr. Jelen, like abuse at home, They might not be really ready to talk about it, or they don't have enough trust to talk about those situations at home, So some questions in the ACE are kind of, number one, very personal, right? Because it refers to, their home life. So they might not be ready right away to talk about those. So I think we should give them time, maybe when they finish the orientation part of the program, and see, if they are more open, they're more stable. Okay, so and also when you give it to them, explain a little bit what it is. Okay, the tool. So yeah, wait for a little bit. Don't give it too soon. Okay. And then, don't give it too late either, because you want some information about their possible history of trauma. Okay, questions?
Doc, you mentioned earlier that there are cases of somatization due to trauma. How do you differentiate somatization from malingerers?
That has been our constant struggle with, yeah. So, well, between Welbert and you, Gilbert and you should be able to actually identify somatization more than Gilbert. In other words, okay, a medical doctor would be able to, right? More. Yeah. Yeah, of course, doctors will have a little bit more advantage over a lay person. Okay, if there is malingering there. Okay, so because you can look at for certain things and say, oh, what's causing this? Okay, so it's tough sometimes to navigate that. No, even though you might be a doctor and it's still tough to actually determine that. But make an effort. Try your best to actually, see if you can sort it out. In other words, do not dismiss it. The best way we can do is do not dismiss it 100%. But take it like, you have some reservations about it. You have mental reservations that it could be 50-50. Yes.
Usually in our experience, kasi po, I've been a doctor since 1996, so that's almost 30 years. I've encountered a lot of malingerers claiming for insurance or trying to get a medical certificate for absences in work. Ganyan po. Yun yung most common na malingerers na na-encounter ko before I went to the rehab. So, I've seen a lot of, I'm not claiming to be an expert, okay? Kasi kanya-kanya tayo expertise eh. Siguro, based on experience na lang ang aking po dyan.
Yes, definitely.
So, sa case po dito, sir, sa rehab, we know that most drug addicts, PWODs pala, most PWODs are, especially those who were court mandated to undergo rehab, are manipulative. So, sa experience ni Doc, pagka ganyan mga pre-bargainers or mga court mandated na ano more common sa kanila? Somatization or malingering? Kasi alam ko manipulative kasi sila eh.
Well, if their mindset is still on that, it would be malingering, I would say.
So, as mga doctors kasi is more on evidence-based kami nagde-decide. Hindi kami madaling ma-manipulate actually.
Okay.
Kasi we base on facts, laboratories, and So, hindi kami pwede yung kakausapin lang namin alam na namin na malingerer to. So, when we do that, although may rare times na may somatization po. So, yun po naman nire-refer na namin sa psychiatrist po. So,
Okay.
ganun. So, pagka ganun po na malingerer, sa experience nyo, Doc, what do you do? Sa amin kasi ginagawa namin, nagbibigay kami ng mga placebo. We try to give placebo.
Okay.
Kunyari, initially, nakailan na tayo ng ganyan eh. Marami na eh. Merong iba nagke-claim na dumudugo ang puwet, ganyan. So we give them high fiber diet
Yeah.
para
So once you determine they're invested into, faking things, like they're trying to fake it, very likely, it's malingering. And then probably work around that issue of, talk about it, right, with a counselor and say, hey, what's going on with that? And then see if you are able to actually get into the bottom of things. Why does he have to malinger, right? Maybe there is no need to malinger. Why would they malinger to begin with? What are they trying? What are they trying to gain by malingering? I think we need to establish that. Okay. Okay. So, all right. So while okay, so okay, well, give them placebo, and then say it will actually resolve in 2 days, and then unless actually there are stool that it's like flowing with blood and all over the place. Short of that, yeah, you can, and then don't leave it there, and then find out, what is the gain? What are they trying to gain by malingering? Like, okay, so they want to be exempted from the floor, and then so you can work around there. What's gonna happen if you keep doing that? You're not moving up in the program, and you are mandated in the program, and you're not moving up in the process. So what's gonna happen to you? And we regularly report to the court how you're doing in the program, because many of them feel like I want to finish this program. So this is gonna set you back, right? This is gonna set you back if you continue, to be off the floor. So see, find your way to actually just get around that.
story lang po. We had an incident kasi before na ang complaint dumudugo daw ang puwet. So, tapos, naging excuse niya yon para makalabas. Actually, 1 month siya na nasa labas there was a failure on follow-up, hindi na mo-monitor.
Okay.
And then, there were other residents who tried to copy that. Nagko-complain din sila ng bleeding sa puwet, tapos may dinikdik na butike para lang magkaroon ng dugo yung kanyang stool para makalusot. Pero when we made kailangan creative ka So, we made since, di ba, pag hematochezia, usually high fiber diet, ganyan, we maintained the person on high fiber diet for about 1 month. A lot of those who were initially complaining of bloody stools suddenly got cured.
There you go. Yeah, so that's a good way. That's a good intervention. Bigyan mo ng laxative. Nako, mapurga siya. Okay, so I'm sure you will come up with some strategy on how to get around this. Yes, malingering is common because, they want to avoid something, right? So work around that. Once you find out what it is they're trying to avoid, just build up and work on that and say, this is going to work against you. You know that? We are avoiding this, but this is the consequences for avoiding that. You're going to get stuck in here. Your peers are going to move up and you would still be the same thing. And if you're expecting, if you're expecting, to stay here for 6 months, 6 months you will be in that situation. And everybody is already like gone ahead of you. So something to that effect. First of all, find why they are. And then work around there. Okay? And then begin to actually diminish that. And then, the other intervention of giving them like a high fiber diet is an excellent one. An excellent one. Okay. Questions? Nicole.
Doc, may question with regards to um, traumatic induced psychosis among our clients who may have pursued to using substance use. My question is, how can patients with pre-existing psychiatric condition induced by trauma best prepare for the rehabilitation program? Is it okay to have those clients be stabilized psychiatrically speaking before letting them enter the rehab program, or allowing them to be admitted and then treat them while having the rehabilitation program with regards to their psychiatric problem?
Very often we can manage the situation, right? Both. We favor addressing the issue together, both. Okay, it's an integrated approach to substance use and co-occurring disorder. So we consider trauma as a co-occurring disorder. So the ideal approach is do it together. Okay, so that you really need the psychiatrist's involvement in the initial assessment. You know, especially if you already identify the person as a co-occurring disorder, whatever it is. And you're lucky to have a psychiatrist, really, because some TRCs don't have any. Seriously. Okay. Yeah, I know, because that's the first question I ask when I'm doing trauma seminar. I said, do you have a psychiatrist? And the answer is, no, we have to bring our clients to the city. Yeah, so it's tedious for them because, you know, the other problem with that is you cannot just use any psychiatrist. The psychiatrist should be knows about addiction, right? At the same time, and not all psychiatrists are familiar with addiction. Okay. All right. Questions, comments?
Doc, I would like to comment on the question of Dr. Nico. So since we're dealing with a psychiatric patient with trauma and substance use disorder, I think we should first manage what's the most, yung pinaka-immediate na need ng patient, which is to stabilize the behavioral, tawag dito, the behavioral problem. The patient should be behaviorally manageable. So we use the medications or pharmacotherapy. And then once the patient is stable, we continue the program, and the trauma will be addressed, syempre, for long periods. Kasi yung trauma na to, it happened from the moment the patient was born until the time na nag-seek siya ng consultation sa atin. So, hindi natin siya kayang i-manage overnight, or kahit sa 6 months to 1 year na yan, kulang pa yan to address the trauma of the patient.
So the word is to stabilize the client behaviorally and psychologically, right? Because you won't be able to make an assessment, right, and do all those necessary things unless the client can function. Correct?
Comment ko lang, sir.
Yes, go ahead, Romel.
We need the medications to stabilize the patient. Okay? So, hindi pwede yung usap-usap lang. Kasi these patients are manipulative. Alam nila kung sino uto-uto. Pag uto-uto ka, sasabihin nila yung gusto nila, kasi kung maniniwala ka naman. Okay? So, kailangan talaga ng clinical eye. Okay? So, hindi pwedeng kausap mo lang okay na. Hindi. Kaya nga we need yung medications and proper therapy. Hindi pwede yung marites lang.
Okay. All right. Questions, comments? Yes, Dr. Jalen.
Bali, Doc, I have 2 more questions. Yung una po, Doc, you mentioned a while ago na after the orientation, you can actually do the ACE, right? But I think there are people who are still quite reserved of disclosing their real story. Can we repeat the ACE again on this probably senior phase? And then the second question is, since we are culturally highly spiritual group of people here, we are highly religious. So we tend to incorporate a lot of biblical or religious things in our program. And you said a while ago that if the patient had been diagnosed with trauma or traumatic experiences, it's the last thing that you could actually provide, a self-actualization. So can we just actually focus more on value enhancement? I mean, focusing more on the values that the patient should have instead of focusing on the religious aspect, and probably more on religious ideas, probably on the latter part of the program or in the aftercare. Yun lang po.
Okay. So the first question, yes, you can repeat the A's. Okay. So the religious part, no? And I do value the spirituality, and recovery. Okay. But that spirituality should be more a natural outgrowth of the person's effort to really improve himself. Okay. So like I said, he will be, he'll be ready, when he has actually achieved a certain level of maturity in the program. So I'm talking about maturity, So at a very early part ng program, religion and spiritual is the farthest thing from their mind. You know that, right? Because they're struggling. They have a lot of feelings of guilt, failure. We want them to actually focus those, to take a look at those things. And it's okay for them to suffer and feel, because now they can really look at things differently because they are not using drugs. And they are in the program away from their family, away from their friends. So they are actually looking at a lot of things that happen to them, and including their lives. Okay? And that to me is a precursor to you later on really seeking out a genuine desire, to practice your faith. So that's the way I see it. I think it's developmental, developmental. It's part of change also. If the person has achieved a high level of change, that desire, they're more open to those kind of things. But in the beginning, I don't think that would have any value for them. They'll probably, the word palliatives? It becomes just a palliatives for them. It doesn't mean much. So that's my view. And sometimes, we have to remember where they are at emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. They are not at the same level with many of us. Their mind are still crude. The vibration of their mind is still crude. It's not subtle. To really practice and experience real religious experience is you have to have, maybe a finer vibration or something like that. You're in a different wavelength. Their wavelength is so crude at this. They're thinking about, how I can continue to use drugs, and how I can, get over this. That's what their preoccupation are. That's not a mind ripe for religious practice at all. Okay? So, but once they're stable, right? Nagbago na yung pananaw nila sa buhay. Yan, sa kanila. In fact, they will manifest that what you're talking about. And I really believe that part of change is, when a person achieves that higher level of change, that person is naturally, to me, seeking spirituality. This is where I really give concern to my brothers and sisters. I really care about them. You feel like they're more genuine. They're more honest. Diba? So what else do you need? Isn't that a spiritual quality of a person, that he's being honest, that he goes out of his way to help his brothers in a genuine way? To me, it can be nothing more spiritual than that. To me, spirituality is more in action rather than the rituals. How they practice, how they treat each other, how they care for other people. That to me is spirituality itself. I don't have to teach them anything. Okay? And then, before you know it, they'll be like, hey, can I go to church? They will ask for that. Okay? So we do not have to induce that. We are already, this is the way I see it. We are tilling the ground. Remember that parable? You throw your seeds on an unfertile ground. Does it grow? No. So we are tillers of the ground. The rehabilitation process is tilling the ground so that when you plant the seed of spirituality, it will grow, right? I mean, that's the best metaphor I could think of. You throw your seeds to a ground that is not rich, that's not tended, that's not prepared, nothing comes out of it. Does that make sense? Makes sense, right? Okay. So I am not. Listen, I have been through a lot of this. When I work in Thailand, I was working with a religious group. Okay, my boss, I told you, was a priest. He was an American who hired me to start the TC in Thailand. Thailand is a Buddhist country. Okay, so I told my colleagues, and some of them were nuns. They said we have to be very careful that we do not come across as trying to convert these people. That is not our job to convert them into Christianity or Catholicism. I said our job is to help them get over their drug abuse and help them live a moral life, a clean life, right? And if we can achieve that, that's that's a spiritual work. Okay? So I had that conversation. I said, we are not going to put any signs, saints, and all of that, right? They did not like that. Okay? So I said, if you're going to put that signs all over, I said, then we have to give them a room where they can meditate. And they can put the statue or image of Buddha over there. In fairness. Because I don't want us to be accused of we are, trying to promote our religion. So it became very controversial. So they said, oh, we have to dismantle that meditation room because this is owned by a Catholic church. Okay? So it gets so controversial like that, right? But I keep telling them, I said, if we help these clients, right, because you know what happens? They were encouraging them to go to church. Of course, they are going to go to church because they wanted palaparin nila yung papel nila dun sa mga sister. So, nagpupuntahan sa simbahan. Sabi ko, oh my God. They don't even know what the Mass is all about. But the sisters were so happy that they are going to church. I was not happy about it because I know pakitang tao lang yun. No? Para lang makakuha sila ng privileges at saka okay yung mga sisters sa kanila. But the sisters did not see it that way. So I have been in that kind of situation, Dr. Jelen. And my philosophy there is like, as much as possible, let's take out the religion from what we do. We teach our faith and what we believe in from how we carry out our job. Right? So to me, that's the best manifestation of our spirituality and our belief and our faith in how we carry out our job and how we treat our clients and how much, we care about, making our program work for these people. That's it. Right? And our clients will not miss that. They will pick that up from you guys. Okay? So, and you don't have any problem with these people because they are all Christians anyway, and Catholics. Right? So, yeah, some of them, eventually would say, can we go to Mass on Sunday? Can we organize something? I wonder, do they go to church? Mass? Oh, okay, good. Yeah, it will come naturally. Do not feed it to them. You know why? It's not an equal footing, right? It's not equal. They are clients and we are staff, right? Whatever we do, they will follow. Yeah. Including if we try this into a religious institution, they'll probably would have no complaint over that. Okay, but that's not the way to do it. That's Okay, we separate them. We are professional people, we're therapists. It doesn't mean that we cannot practice our faith, and we practice our faith by our action and what we do with other people. Right? Does that make sense, guys? Okay. All right, and with that, we should have a good lunch, right? All right, thank you.